Dames en heren. Nou, heel geanimeerd. Ik stel voor dat we doorgaan met het programma. De volgende spreker is Jason Sheeley. The next speaker is Jason Sheeley. He's of the United States Corps of Engineers. And he will speak about his experience with the high water situations in last year. And I think it's a very interesting presentation, and you see the differences how we do it here in the Netherlands and how they do it in the United States. And also the severeness of the things you experienced with respect, he's sitting next to Henk, the severeness of our experience of the beginning of this year. So I think, Jason, very interesting presentation. The floor is yours.
Well, I trust everyone had a good coffee break, and I sense a lot of energy in the room, and I'm going to try to maintain that energy by challenging you to understand the words that I'm speaking. I learned a few minutes ago, before this presentation, that I know 2 Dutch words that I'll use here in a moment. I will try to translate those as best I can. Quick introduction about myself. I have 2 jobs for the Army Corps of Engineers. First, on a national project, I'm responsible for making sure we make consistent dam breach inundation maps. So we are studying all 650 dams in the Corps of Engineers across the United States, trying to conduct consistent studies to show the public and to show policymakers what the consequences would be if we were to breach one of those dams. The other job that I have, and this is the one I'm speaking to you from today, is as a supervisor of map makers and data managers in the Corps of Engineers Kansas City District. And in a few minutes I'll show you a slide and give you some perspective on the role and background of our district. The main point for now is that the geographic area of our district is about 8 times the size of the Netherlands. But don't let that size impress you, because the area that is at risk of flooding, if there were to be flooding, is more around 5% of the area of the Netherlands. So hopefully that gives you some perspective. Real quickly, a little bit more about myself. I am a gardener. This is my glass house, or I would call greenhouse. And the Dutch bulbs I am so proud of that I planted last fall and saw for the first time about 1 week ago. The tulips I planted are probably in full bloom right now while I'm in the Netherlands. But I'm okay with that because I was in the Keukenhof on Tuesday, and I'm sure I saw many more tulips that I would see in my backyard. I did my job and helped the Netherlands economy by spending about €100 on bulbs while I was out there, and it was money well spent. I'm very impressed by what I saw, and these pictures of the fields. I saw one on the internet, and I thought it was a false color photograph from the sky because it was so colorful. So real quickly, I'm going to condense my statistics that I provide down to a minimum. That's one phase of the presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools that we use nationally in the Corps of Engineers over the whole United States to give you perspective, the National Levee Database and the Levee Inspection System, not only how we use them in what we call our routine program or our day-to-day, year-to-year inspection processes, but also how we implement and use those tools and the people that apply those tools during a flood event. And the majority of my presentation is focused on what we call emergency or contingency operations during a flood that we experienced last June in 2011. So the 2 words that I want to present to you as the focal point of my presentation. This is where I try to use my Dutch, which to your ears is probably going to sound like Afrikaans, or if I'm not good at all, maybe even sound like English. The first word is consistency. You need to do, this is the message from the Corps of Engineers, be consistent in what you do. A little bit of consistency in the tools that are used across the nation helps to understand what we would call big picture. And then consistency year to year in the people doing the inspections is also very important. And we have some messages today to help share that. So the Dutch word I was taught for consistency is, see if I can pronounce this, uniform. Very good English word as well. I'm so grateful. The second message, I use the term, and over in the States we would use the term vigilance. Be vigilant in what you do. Understand that in the routine year to year when there are no floods, it's important to stay alert. That's the Dutch word I was taught, alert. I'm so grateful that those are English words as well. So without further ado, after having given you the bottom line of my presentation already, we'll move into some of the details. The flooding that I'm going to speak about occurred on the Missouri River main stem in the United States. The tan area that you see is the area of the basin, the drainage area of the Missouri River. This covers 10 states, and Kansas City, where I work and live, is the bright red dot. So if we look at that basin in a little more detail, this is the Kansas City district. This is the area that I mentioned is 8 times the size of the Netherlands. So you can imagine, extrapolate the size of this area. The river itself is almost 4,000 kilometers long. That's the longest river in North America. And you see the statistics there on the size of the area. These are, each of these blue dots, a levee system along the Missouri River. So you can see the density of the dots. There are levees in other streams and rivers, but most of the levees that we are responsible for are along the main stem of the Missouri River. The other things we do real quickly as a district are maintaining navigation on that river, as well as construction for 5 military bases, Air Force and Army, in 2 states of Kansas and Missouri. So we don't do just flood control work, but in 2011, that's all we did. 156 levee systems, 1,035 miles of levees. That's in our district. Nationally, it's not completely certain, but over 11,000 total miles of levees in the United States. Just a quick couple pictures, common levees. This is the Kansas City metropolitan area, the most populated area in our district along the Missouri River. The point of this is a major tributary of the Missouri River, both in flood stage in this photo. Most of this area in this photo would be underwater if the levees were not doing their jobs and providing protection. This is an agricultural levee upstream of Kansas City. In 2007, as you can see, it overtopped and flooded this farmland. There is no, maybe I did that, who knows. There's no population, there's no residences behind that particular levee. Tools that we use every day in our routine program. This is the National Levee Database. It's accessible to everybody in the United States, everybody in the world. You can Google National Levee Database. That's probably a term that transcends all languages as well. And get to this home screen of the National Levee Database. I'll give you some examples of what's available for every levee in the United States managed by the Corps of Engineers. This levee, 488, it's the number designator we use as the name of the levee, is this area. This is the levee in the dark, and then the shaded area is what is protected by that levee upstream of Kansas City on the Missouri River. You can generate some basic statistics about the levees. You can see the inspection ratings for our levees, but I don't think it's actually visible in this particular screen. We have precise elevation data for the levees. So this is just an example of a cross-section for one of the levees in our area. Very useful. We produced inundation maps that I'll show you in a moment during the flood event, and without this detail of elevation data, those maps would not have been very accurate. So this National Levee Database is very helpful to us for that. Another tool that we use during the floods is what I show here. I'm going to keep the explanation of it very short. We don't have any sensors or automation equipment on our levees. This is all manual assessment. What we have is a gauge in the river that allows us to understand the elevation or the stage of the river at any moment. We correlate that to the low spot on the levee and estimate the amount of height available on the levee. We call that freeboard. So because we have so many levees and so few people, we use this to help us prioritize where to put our efforts in the field. The yellow means at that amount of freeboard we start watching things more closely. We start making phone calls with the owner of the levee to see how things are going. At the orange, we stop trusting the back of the envelope approach that we're using here, and we make sure we're in the field looking at that levee on a daily basis. During the flood event, you see we got to within less than 3 feet of clearance or freeboard on that 488 levee that I've been speaking about. The next tool I'm going to speak about is our levee inspection system. This is a screen out of that system. This is what our inspectors are looking at while they're out in the field. It's a laptop or pad computer with a GPS unit on it and a handheld camera. It's not much to look at. It's basic technology. We saw very similar technology in the presentation earlier this morning. And they're working on the map as they're out in the field doing their inspections. This screen, real quickly, this is the bottom line. This is the results of the inspection for the levee from the prior year. So the idea here is the inspector prints off this 1 or 2 pages of deficiencies that were identified in the previous year so that when they go out for the next inspection, they understand that they need to revisit those locations and look at whether or not those deficiencies were taken care of by the levee owner. The ratings that we use, M is what we call minimally acceptable, U is unacceptable, and then A is like the best grade you can get, acceptable. We don't need to print that assessment information because it met the criteria that we have for our inspections. What we produce for the record is a more detailed report, again out of a database, so across the country it's consistent nationwide. We pick the components of the report that make sense for the levee that we're studying. So again, this 488, same levee I've been talking about. We don't have flood walls on that levee, so we don't include that portion of the report. Here's one page. So we have an acceptable rating for operations and maintenance manuals. When we audited or inspected that levee owner, they showed us their manuals. We could identify that they were current and up to date, so they got the acceptable rating. If we had, I guess the other point is, the criteria that we use to assign that rating are written out right here in the report. If we had a deficiency, either an M or a U level rating, we would document here the reasons for having that deficiency documented. What the consistency allows us to do is roll up and create a summary report. In this case, it's for all levees in our district. This is the color code that we assign for those acceptable, unacceptable, and minimally acceptable ratings. So M means minimally acceptable. As you can see, we have no red. We have no unacceptable levees per our inspection criteria. We can generate that same sort of a report nationwide when and if we need to. Staff, real quickly. We have a levee safety program manager, so a lead engineer in our office that makes sure everything is done in the right way and at the right time. A data manager, that's the person I supervise personally, making sure all the information we collect is cataloged and stored appropriately. 2 inspectors. Remember the miles we're talking about, 500 miles of river, the kilometers of levee length that we're inspecting. We aren't the levee owner. We're the regulator, and we provide engineering assistance. So we just do a quick inspection of the levee each year. Project engineers, we have 175 total projects, not all levees, but 175 total in our district. 13 lead engineers split those projects up. We have structural design engineers, geotechnical engineers, and then the data and map people, about 130 in total that support those lead engineers to play those roles. So real quickly, then each year we do the annual inspection, which I've talked about. This is one slide that shows how we extend that. Every 5 years we do what we call a periodic inspection, and then every 10 years we do a periodic assessment. And my understanding of the concept of assessments in the Netherlands and in the United States is they're all very similar. It's a more detailed engineering analysis on these time frames of the performance of the levee. Okay, now into the flood operations portion of the discussion. We had record rainfall and snowpack in this portion of the basin. We had never filled one of these dams in the past, much less all 6 of them. Tried to generate statistics to explain the volume of water, and I couldn't come up with anything. It translates to something like 19 million Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water that had to be transferred down the main stem of this river to the confluence with the Mississippi River at St. Louis in Missouri. This was the dam that we watched the release rate from, because it controlled all of the flooding that was going to occur downstream. We had historic flooding on this river system all the way from the Fort Peck Dam down to Kansas City at about this location, where that main tributary I showed you in the photo did not contribute any more water into the system, and our river then had the capacity to transfer the water without much flooding downstream. The most important thing to remember about this slide is the duration of the flood event that we experienced. It's unprecedented. It hopefully will be the most longest duration flood event that we have in the United States ever. We were in flood operations for 142 total days. We had some preparation time, and we had some time to wrap things up afterwards, but we were at risk of losing levees from before the 13th of June clear up until the 1st of September of last summer. This is how our levees performed. Real quickly, the idea of a federal levee is it was built to higher and better criteria than what we call a non-federal levee. I'll leave my explanation that simple. So we breached or overtopped a significant number of the non-federal levee systems. We did much better on the federal levee systems. Going back to that one slide I showed with all the colors about the freeboard on the levees, we were able to assess using the National Levee Database and some other tools which levees we believed we could fight, that's the term we use, flood fight, extreme measures to keep the levee from failing during the flood event, and which levees we believed the volume of water and the elevation of the river was going to be so high that there was nothing we could do to keep those levees from failing. I'm going to show you a quick video now. So as we're moving around, this is Google Earth, so it's another tie to some of the comments that were made earlier this morning. As we zoom in, this is where our district begins. The blue area is the area that's flooded on the 7th of July. The yellow are the non-federal levees, and you can see many of them are overtopped or breached. The green are the federal levees, and in this area you see that they've all held. We move on down the river system. Here's an area, again, of non-federal levees. We have a village in this particular area that was flooded and evacuated. This is a levee on Fort Leavenworth, and their airfield was underwater for most of the time that I talked to you about a few minutes ago. Here we're coming into the Kansas City metropolitan area, and you see that we still have extensive flooding. And then we get to those large metropolitan levees that we have in this river system, and those levees performed very well during this event. We had no issues. So that was a quick tour of 130 miles of river, most of those flooded acres or square kilometers that I talked about earlier were in this stretch of river. We're back to the levee that I keep picking on, that one I call 488, and so we're going to look at it in a little more detail. First, how we staff during the emergency event. Our levee owners are out there doing a lot of work. Remember, these are not Corps of Engineers people. These are water board people, how you would say in the Netherlands. We engage with them when there is a major issue on a levee with a technical response team, a team of engineers who will go out there and work with that owner every day, every hour, as needed and requested by the owner. The first thing we send out to the field are what we call liaison teams. Their job is to leave the office every morning and visit 4, 5, or 6 levees, touch base with the owner, see if the owner believes they have any issues. If the owner believes they're having issues, take a quick look and determine whether or not the technical response team is required to go out there and provide assistance. Staff duty officers are just the people in the office that man the phones and coordinate all the data and information coming in from the field. Let me ask, how am I doing on time? 5? Okay. Examples of some of the things we experienced. Sand boils. I think that is a picture that everybody probably understands. We had so many sand boils along this system because of the duration of the event that we stopped making maps of where all of these sand boils were occurring. The yellow line is where there were so many sand boils we couldn't take the time to survey each one individually. Every levee in our system on this 130 miles of river would have had a map that looked much like this had we had the time and the resources to build them. Levee 488. This is what our issue at that levee looked like in the field. This is what it looked like under the water. This is the normal profile toe of the levee on the riverward side. This is the depth of the scour that developed. Each one of these lines is just the same location surveyed every successive day. This is what it looks like on a map. And you can watch that scour progress upstream. So we had to find a way to deal with that issue and keep from losing this levee. So what we're going to do here, and it might be the last thing we do depending on time, is bring up a video that gives you insight onto how we dealt with this. One of the things you're going to see, and I want you to tie back to the video you saw this morning in the presentation, you're seeing our levee inspectors. You're seeing how they operate. And I want to say the biggest difference you will see is that the one water board we saw in the video, everybody wore a blue shirt. In the Corps of Engineers, we wear red shirts, but we all do very much the same job. So let's go ahead and turn the video on.
Levee 488. That was found by one of our technical teams who happened to decide they need to go check on the performance of that levee from a previous armoring we had done due to a scour. And at 6 o'clock in the evening, we found a serious problem.
Yeah, L488 is one of our federal levee systems in southern Holt County. This flood event was very hard on the levee systems throughout Holt County. L497, which is a federal levee system just upstream, and L488 are the only two levee systems that have not been overtopped or breached in that entire county's floodplain.
This area through here caught our eye. There was some suspicious looking eddies in there that we decided we should watch. And sure enough, about 2.5 weeks ago, we found a lake failure right on the other side of that truck over there. And there was a humongous eddy and vortex. We had to do a whole lot of emergency repairs.
What it ultimately was a very large, I'll say about a 40-foot deep scour hole at the riverward toe of the L488 levee. That scour led to the sloughing of the riverside slope and a near breach of that levee.
Those extraordinary steps included sending a survey vessel that had multi-beam sonar on it to develop a picture of what the scour looked like, to tell us how the scour was encroaching upon the toe, to also determine if the measures that we were taking were having a positive effect on decreasing those velocities before we checked in the scour. And I think we put over 14,000 tons of quarry-run stone on that levee system here in the last couple of weeks.
However, due to that inspection late in the evening, and due to the spirit and the attitude and response of all those folks involved, contracting, engineering, the battle captains, we were able to get rock started within hours.
And we've constructed some fairly significant hard points or dikes that protrude perpendicular to the levee slope that have allowed us to push the velocities away from the toe and back towards the river.
But we're keeping it pushed out away from the levee, and as the river goes down, things will get better and better. We're not going to lose this levee because we're doing something. If we hadn't done anything, we could have lost it 3 times already. So that's where we are, and we're staying on top of it.
At Levee 488, it's a fight. It's a fight with the river right now. And some days the river's winning, and some days we're able to defend it off. But I'm telling you, if not for the professionalism and the dedication of our employees out there and the team that we have at Kansas City District, we would not be able to defend this levee system the way that we are.
So if you can imagine that type of effort for 142 days, up to 24 hours a day when needed, you can imagine the life that I lived and hundreds of people in the Corps of Engineers lived last summer. Remember the message of being consistent with what you do in the routine times so that you're ready for times like this. And remember that word vigilance. Do it well, because if you don't do the routine stuff well, your systems won't be ready for an event like this. I think for the sake of time, I'm going to just show some damage slides as we're taking questions. They really speak for themselves. I don't need to say much. So why don't we turn to questions, and I'll just flip some slides as we do that.
Jason, thank you very much. Impressive presentation. Before I forgot it, there is a lot of room for questions. At 1 o'clock, we have organized a meet and greet with you.
Okay.
And 1 o'clock, that is in the Mount Kenya Lodge, somewhere over here. So you have a lot of the opportunity to discuss more further on this topic.
Great.
I have one main question. Maybe it's a bit difficult to judge for you, but what is the main difference in approach, let's say the Dutch approach and your approach? Let's say in a positive and a negative way.
I'll try. I'll try. In the 2 or 3 days of education I've received, I would say that the positive similarity is that I understand we're really all dealing with the same problem, and in actually very much the same way. Yeah. So it's very nice to have these collaborations between the RWS and the Corps of Engineers. Sometimes it just confirms that, hey, we're going down the right path. Transitioning to the negative aspect, maybe people argue whether it's negative or positive, but I think there's much more scientific and technical effort put in the Netherlands. I don't know if it's American culture, but we have a tendency to fly by the seat of our pants, trust the lead engineer to say, if that's the problem we're having, that's the direction we need to go, and we go get it done.
Okay, that's very nice. Maybe 1 or 2 questions here general, and then we can, at 1 o'clock, you can discuss it more with Jason. 1 or 2 questions. Who? Or you're safe it for 1 o'clock. Ooit.
Jason, how does the inspection report for next flood event look like? Is it all unacceptable?
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of politics in trying to find the funding to rehabilitate or repair these levees. The goal we had was to put the levees back into their initial condition by, I think, the 1st of May was the goal. It's been a very big challenge, and we have dozens of people in our office working very hard ever since the flood water subsided to try to meet that goal.
I'm interested in what the costs are for the rehabilitation, so maybe later in the afternoon you can tell something about it.
Yeah, maybe later in a smaller group setting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very nice. Okay. We do 2 questions. You.
Yes, Jason, in the Netherlands we are looking for places where we can store water when there are extreme water amounts. We accept the places to flood. Do you have the same like this in the United States, or is it acceptable to flood the area?
The way I'll answer that, the system that I talked about, the Missouri River system, the levees in that system were all developed after the district that I worked for was created a little over 100 years ago. There was intent from the very beginning to make sure that the levees upstream of Kansas City are not as large, not as substantial as the levees in the metropolitan area. So some of the overtoppings that we had during this event were by intent to create that storage. And the levee owners, typically agricultural levees, understand when those events are going to occur, and they will most often breach their levee downstream so that the water fills up nice and slowly into that leveed area, that protected area, so that it minimizes the damage, the scouring and the deposition that would occur. So there's a lot of intent to make sure we have that storage.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We have 1 question over there. Yeah.
You were talking about the landowners, but who are those landowners? Are those the owners of the parcels or the communities?
Are the owners of the levees the communities? Is that the question? Who are the owners? Yes.
The owners, the juridical owners.
Yes. Typically for a levee that protects the community, it's the community, and they will levy a tax to the property owners behind that levee. On the agricultural levies, it's basically the same thing. It's the collaboration of landowners with property. Typically, they built that levee and then asked for it to be in our program, because our program, the reason it exists is to provide assistance if there is damage. So yes, the owners are the owners of the levees are the property owners.
Okay.
Thank
Jason, a big applause after this.